Welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Okay, you're good to go.
All right. Good afternoon, everybody. Appreciate you all coming. And Lisa, thanks for getting all this stuff together and out to us ahead of time. That's always helpful. Appreciate it a lot. I'd like to, it's 2:01 p.m. in the afternoon of November 8th. And we'd like to start the Utility and Transportation Advisory Commission electronic meeting. And we now call it to order. And Lisa, if you wouldn't mind doing a roll call, that would be great.
Certainly. Obviously, Chair Bennett is here. Commissioner Kress?
Here.
Commissioner Selby?
Present.
Commissioner Tessman? I see him. Do you have audio? Commissioner Tessman, do you have audio?
Here, I'm sorry.
Thank you. Commissioner Regal?
Here.
Okay, we also have with us City Administrator Mike Rizzatello, Public Works Director Robert McAndrews, Alex Fazzari with JUB, Rebecca Francic with BDI, and Garrett Gronkowski. Did I say that correctly?
You went the more traditional, famous Gronkowski. I'm just Gronkowski. It's very close. You can just run with it if you want. I have a bunch of friends.
Sorry.
No worries. But we also have Taylor on
Taylor
as well, who actually manages the day-to-day relationship with Burton College Place.
And you do have a quorum. You're good to go.
Very good. Thank you very much. All right. First up, we have the consent agenda. And we have the agenda for today on there, the minutes from August 19th. And is there any discussion about that? Do we have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I move that we approve the consent agenda.
Thank you.
Second. Commissioner Selby.
Okay, we have a first and a second. Was there any comments about the agenda? Okay, seeing no comments, we will approve the consent agenda and move on to the regular agenda now. All right, Mr. Rizzatello, would you start with our draft capital facility plan?
Yes. So with this item, this is before you today for an advisory vote, because then you'll go to city council. So a little bit of history on this. This covers capital items and the various departments and utilities and transportation with each project over 5,000 in expenditure. Any of the advisory boards where a project touches it, that element of the capital facilities plan goes for their approval. So it already did receive advisory votes from the Economic Development Commission and then the Park and Recreation Board for their elements. You approve this whole thing for recommendation as city council, since the purview of this body is the utilities and transportation. So there's essentially two documents attached to this. The first one is like the Cliff's Notes iteration of the capital facility plan, which shows that it's divided up by department, the ID, which it's tied to our asset management database, prioritization. So with the prioritization, 3 priorities. High means it needs to happen no matter what. Medium means if it needed to be, it could be delayed, but it needs to happen at some point. And then low is as there are grant funds or other mechanisms to make it happen, but that's not critical by any means. Project description has essentially the general dynamics of what each is. Status, green budget means likely that it'll happen next year. The orange color means it's planned. Year budget, that means the first year in which it's budgeted. And then there's various columns for each of the next 6 years. Since it's a 6-year plan, the first year's concrete, the other years are a little more malleable, but it's a plan. So that's what we're trying to aim things for. And then how the project is funded, that essentially goes into on a percentage basis what's paying for each of these projects. So you have the Cliff's Notes. The other document is the booklet version of the capital facilities plan. So I'll briefly go over that. Page 1 just is the cover. Page 3 is the table of contents. Page 4 goes into what is a capital facility plan. Page 5 goes into the priority projects. So there's a lot of projects that we do year to year, but the priority ones are ones that we're putting our most effort on or are very impactful. So the impactful projects you see before you in this list. So well number 6, it's finally wrapping this up. The other council meeting the other night, the contract for the well house and get that going was finally approved because the state approved the well house plans and so forth. So we're finally going to get that done and get wrapped up in the spring. Wastewater treatment plant, we're going to wrap up again the bid documents prepared and initial getting it positioned for construction. But this upcoming year will be key for assembling the grants because it's a very expensive project. It's over $25 million. Regional fire training tower, current one we use, has been condemned pretty much for a number of years. In city of Walla Walla, District 4 in the city, we're chipping all together in thirds to make that project a reality. 4 bikes makes permanent what the demonstration project was a couple weeks ago. So extending the cycle track on 4th out to College and put in pedestrian street lamps. This project will be going actually throughout the winter and early spring. We need to get going on it per conditions on our grant. Lions Park renovation, we've successfully fundraised for that. So we're going to position that where construction will be going next year. It would not surprise me if it continues into the following year due to the breadth of that project. Southwest Majanier is mainly an engineering project next year with construction following in subsequent years. And then G is the OPMA AV upgrade for council chambers. They'll allow us where we're able to do actually hybrid meetings because right now with our antiquated technology system and in general the layout to actually meet the letter of the law with the proclamations and various laws in effect is right now it's impossible until we get that going. Page 6 goes into language with some of our guiding documents, including the comprehensive plan. Page 7 and 8 go into our strategic plan. Page 9 goes into our long-term financial strategy. Page 10 goes into the actual process behind the capital facility plan. Page 11 goes over some of our key completed projects in 2020 and so forth in 2021, including Destito, Meadowbrook, the Parklet, and then getting Southwest Wastewater Trunk Line project teed up, and that should be complete by the end of the year. Comparing the subsequent fiscal years, you can see the split between the various departments here and all of what that entails. So water system is 33% for next year. Parks is 22. Lions Park is quite expensive, but definitely needed. And then wastewater and streets is 18% apiece with storm at 5. But then when you look going into the subsequent years, so page 13 gets into just what FY 2022 is. And you can see the lion's share of our expenditures are in water, wastewater, the parks, and then streets. But streets and luckily with parks, we have that REIT 2 money for that, but streets, basically that's money being diverted out of current expense. It goes to a street fund, but most of that money is being diverted out of current expense where it goes against police, fire, community development, all of that. Now on page 14 is pretty much what the outlay is for the next 6 years. So you can see there the total is about $86.7 million. Where most of the expense lies is wastewater. No surprise with the treatment plant. So that's 33%. Streets is at 29%, followed by water at 17, storm at 7, and then parks at 10% apiece. Page 15 this is really a guesstimate. So when you do a capital facility plan and you have it meet the letter of the law with the Growth Management Act, you have to give a guesstimate of where you think all the money is going to come from. So it's exactly that, it's a guesstimate because we don't have a full crystal ball for 6 years. But I think the key thing to take notice of is that as far as the city standing alone, if it were not for the grants that we get, we'd be up the river without a paddle in that case, because when you look at this, about 49% of the plan is contingent either on grants or future developer contributions, but most of it is grants at 37%. So a lot of us actually getting this done in the future is all predicated on that. Page 16 is the prioritization I went over earlier. Page 17 is a graphic example of the projects over the next 6 years and where they're all at. Page 18 goes into the facilities of what we're doing. And I'm just going to go over his stuff for next year because the stuff in subsequent years you can all take a look at because there's time. But next year is the stuff that's actually happening. So page 19 goes to City Hall. So key thing there is the AV system and fixing up council chambers and doing the architectural plans, not only for council chambers, but the jail cell area to the rear of it in the Sally Port. Because in the next year, we want to turn that into offices, conference room, things like that. But we need to get the plans done at the same time. So that way, when we put money into council chambers, we aren't blowing that money and having to rip up stuff the next year when we do things to the back. So it's an orderly plan. So that's what City Hall is. Page 20 goes to fire department. There's some deferred projects in there just from dealing with COVID and us having a wait on some of this stuff. So replace exterior staircase at 30,000. It's desperately needed. The outside stairs are pretty much rotted. So that needs to happen. Regional training tower, I went over that. That was delayed because City of Walla Walla rejected the bids last year because they came in really wacky. This year they came in a little more reasonable. It's still higher than what we thought, but it's within reason. Renovating dorm room furniture, that's important because as we went over at past meetings, most of our staffing in the fire department is done by volunteers. So if we lost them, we'd be in a world of pain. So we need to make sure that the dorms are in good shape so we retain and attract volunteers. And then water source heat pump replacement at 10,000. Page 21 is police department. So key things, there's the gun range building. You can see a picture of it there. That was a portable unit we actually got for free from the Walla Walla School District. They were gonna just demo it. So we moved it over here. So we just had to pay to move it. But it does need a new roof and some plumbing for a bathroom. So that comes out to 23,000. And then while we replaced one chiller at the police building 2 years ago, now the other one is toast. So we need to replace that 15,000. Going into the next section here, page 22 is infrastructure. So this gets a lot into our utilities. Now we're at parks on page 23, and page 24 is our big project. And you'll notice as we go through each of these projects, you see the prioritization, the cost, what it is, the split of how we're paying for all of it, a picture of what it is, and a map of where it's at. So Lions Park, this is about 3.3 million. And this is marquee project for Blue Zones. They're going to help us with some minor grant writing. And a lot of elements having to do with supporting events and farmers market, like a stage and electrical, things like that they'll help us with. But as far as stuff we already have funded, the splash pad, perimeter walking path, with exercise equipment, we actually got a grant to convert the softball field to one that's multi-purpose with a backstop, inclusive playground and restrooms. That'll definitely be a catalytic project, and we'll get that going next year. Page 25, this one is very much specific on if we get the grant or not. We applied for a Federal Economic Development Administration Tourism and Outdoor Rec Grant. It's out of the American Rescue Plan Act funds the federal government has. In meeting with the Lions Club, if we were funding it ourselves, the option would be to renovate it. But given the fact that that grant money exists at the federal level, by packaging the project as a Lions Park renovation, we're actually able to essentially count all that other grant writing for the other park elements as match. And if we get awarded this, essentially we could get a free building out of it. So that's what we decided to go after. So if that gets awarded, then we should hear about that. My expectation would be December, January-ish. The estimates from Design West was about 2.9 million. And if we get that, that would be born completely out of that tourism grant. It's been submitted, so we have to wait and see. And then these other park projects are for subsequent years. Page 29. Page 29 goes over some I feel is very important that a lot of people don't know. So for our road network, the only roads we can get grants for are what's called federally classified roads. And that means they have a higher traffic count, things like that. So any of the roads that are in purple, red, and green, and then even the yellow over in Homestead, we can get state and federal grants for those. But all the grayed out roads, we're on our own with, which means that we can't write grants for it. And we can use some of the REAP funds, but in general, it's fighting incurring expense against police, fire, and community development and all that, much like all the other projects are. So something to keep in mind. Page 30 is full corridor projects. How this is divvied up is full corridor means we're gonna go in and replace everything in the corridor. So pavement, sidewalk, and then what's underneath like storm, wastewater, water, so on and so forth. Page 31 goes into Majania Road reconstruction. So between College Avenue and Blueview, we now own that. That was annexed into the city a couple of years back. So as that land to the south develops, we need to essentially build that road up to an urban standard because right now it's rural. How we're going to go about that is we did get MPO funds to fund the engineering of it. I am waiting to essentially find out, because that infrastructure bill passed over the weekend, but it's pared down significantly. The initial bill was for about 3 trillion. Now it's a little bit north of 1 trillion. So a lot of projects in there took a haircut. So I'm trying to find out to what extent of a haircut we took. They said they'll know by around Thanksgiving, but we did put in for the highway grant to essentially cover construction. So that's how it's being paid for right now. That could change as we find out how much of a haircut we took with that infrastructure bill. Page 32 goes into Birch. This one is going to be paid for a lot by the storm utility and then the local ARPA, American Rescue Plan Act grant we received. So next year we need to do engineering, and this road's going to be very complex because this actually ties into a grant we received for our elevated water tower. That water tower has an undersized overflow, so essentially we have to build a legitimate overflow, which is going to mean essentially tearing up Birch from about mid-block over to 4th. So doing that, actually putting a crown on that road, because the crown doesn't exist in many places, new curb and gutter, and then the storm infrastructure. So next year will be engineering, and then construction will be in the following year. So it amounts to about $460,000 between 4th and 6th. And then you get into projects in subsequent years like 12th and 10th, and those will be in later years. So after that, we will then get to the storm projects, which start on page 40. So page 41 is our stormwater outfall program. So per our stormwater permit, we actually have to put filters in our outfalls. We've developed a plan to do that as a master plan that was adopted a little over a year ago, and we have to successfully whittle that down essentially every year. However, in order to do this in a cost-effective way, it really makes sense to do it like every other year. So you'll see the total cost is $600,000. Now, specifically in the stormwater element of this, you'll notice that the cost from past years has definitely shot up. And the main reason being is, if you recall, the past plan, the first like half of it was written by parametrics, and then they went like MIA on us. And then Alex Fazzari and JUB, they finished up the plan. They actually assigned legitimate cost to it. So that's why if you look at past iterations of the plan versus this current one, especially in the stormwater element, there's a large deviation. Page 42 is dry wells. This concept was presented a couple of council meetings ago, but we ended up getting a community development block grant for the core of the community to determine if we could treat the water with dry wells, because if we were able to, that would essentially allow us to potentially avoid having to do a giant detention basin, which would cost over $6 million. The plan showed that we could. So the concept is, over the next couple of years, slowly whittle it down and put a variety of dry wells in the core of the community. So you'll see over the next 6 years, it's estimated about $240,000 total. A lot of that we could get with an ecology grant, but either way, this is like way cheaper than digging a giant hole in the ground out at the treatment plant. Page 43, we already wrote the grant for. We're waiting to hear if we received it or not. But this is a decant facility. So essentially, it pulls like the solids from the liquid when we have our street sweeper go up and down the streets. Right now, we don't have a decant facility, so it basically just dries out like on a concrete block bed out at the yard, which isn't really how you're supposed to be doing that. So since we are a permittee, we have to get on this, so we're trying to. So that's what you see right there. And then you get into projects for subsequent years after. Page 45 is street projects. That means pavement or sidewalk only, not what's underneath. Page 46 is chip seal. So that's putting the aggregate on the roads because it keeps the roads in decent shape for about another 10 years. And a picture of what it looks like when it's done with the treatment is on there. So in 2022, it's the neighborhoods all across the highway, so off at Tamarson. So Harvest Meadows, Knapp, and Bliss Lane. All of this is paid for with real estate excise tax. And it's usually about $60,000 a year, and the county does it for us. Page 47 is block resurfacing. This was formalized a couple of years ago because just out of happenstance, it seemed like every year we were fully doing an overlay of a block of road. So we actually formalized it so we could actually plan accordingly. The cost to redo a block has hovered between $30,000 to $35,000. For next year, we're slated to resurface Southeast 6th between College and Date. Main reason is that there is a water line project, and we'll go over that when we get to water projects that's going to be on that block. So essentially it's a twofer type project, and that's paid for with real estate excise tax. Page 48 is for bikes. I alluded to that. We end up getting a complete street grant because we're a complete street community. Based on some communications as of late with TIB, though, we're just going to have to scramble to get this done a lot quicker than anticipated. So we're going to be ordering the lights, doing some of the concrete work throughout the winter and spring and get this thing done. Because as you can see, it's primarily paid for with a Transportation Improvement Board grant. Page 49 is the sidewalk project. So this year we wrapped up putting the sidewalks along Davis, Bade, and then over on 12th. We did get successfully another round of sidewalk money from State Community Development Block Grant. So in this case, we will put sidewalks on the north side of 6th, southwest 6th between College and Davis, and then north side of southwest 8th between College and Bade. So they'll be going on. And then page 50 is the broadband project. So we are writing a variety of grants through a variety of buckets of money. And we can't really say exactly where we're going to get this money from right now because it's so in flux. We do have a local match through our American Rescue Plan Act authorization, but we've written NTIA, Economic Development Administration, Build Back Better, Community Economic Revitalization Board, Public Works Trust Fund. There's a variety of them. So one would think out of about 8 buckets of money, 1 or 2 of them would come through. So if they do, the idea of getting the broadband to home for the whole city would be about $4 million. And then it goes into projects just over time again. So we're going to be working for the crosswalk, parking lot, things like that, but they'll be over time. So now we will get to the wastewater projects, which start on page 62. And with the wastewater projects, the biggest one naturally is the treatment plant. You can see a map of all the improvements and so forth. And again, we're being ordered by the state to do this. And really what we're trying to do is get money from anywhere and everywhere and make this happen, because for a city our size, to do this alone isn't like realistic. So finance staff has written a request through USDA Rural Development, the infrastructure bill, it's in that. So we have to figure out how much of a haircut we took. Ecology, we're submitting for that as well. And we're going to file for a state legislative appropriation. So we'll figure out how to get paid for, but it's definitely a tall order. And either way, as it stands right now, we have to be to construction on that thing within 2023, because within the permit cycle rules, they were saying it needed to be substantially complete by 2023. I'm going to see what we can do about getting extensions and so forth, but at least as of right now, that's where it stands. Page 64 goes into a project that we actually got Public Works Trust Fund money for. This is a lift station. It has no emergency backup. It takes all the sewage from the university and Western College place. And as you could see, it's in a coffee can contraption in the middle of the sidewalk. So the project will entail moving it. So we'll actually build a well house structure similar to what we're doing with Southwest Sewer. So it'll be a little tiny like building, likely across the street somewhere, and it will have a generator. So that way, if the power goes out, we don't have wastewater backups. So that was fully funded by the trust fund. So we'll get the bid out on that shortly. Neighborhood sewer lining program, that's where you use this polyurethane material, inflate it, and cook a new pipe and old pipe, and then it keeps it good for years. We have aggregated this project where essentially we can only do it every other year because otherwise we can't group the projects to a high enough dollar value where the contractors have an interest in coming out here. So we're going to have to group it to every other year, and they'll be paid for with the wastewater utility because that's standard O&M procedure. And then there's a future project, the next one after that. Page 67 goes into water projects. So page 68 is well number 6. That's finally going to get done after all these years, and that should be online next spring. And our initial testing showed that can pull about 3 times the amount of water volume the Peppers Bridge well, the new one, can pull. So we'll be in good shape when that gets going. Page 69 is replacing the steel main over at Sky and Mountain View. This was deferred from 2020 as a COVID measure, and then also the bidding came in really inflated. So with the Public Works Trust Fund money and then ARPA money we earmarked for this, we should be able to make this thing work, and we're going to get this out to bid shortly and finally get that done. And then page 70 ties into that pavement project I mentioned earlier. We need to replace a decayed water line. We'll do that and then repave the road. Page 71 is well number 7. So getting that going, they'll go at the end of Teal. Actually adjacent to the lift station that we're building for Southwest Sewer. And keep in mind with this new well, all the other well work we've done, now we're only caught up to like where we were 5 years ago, yet we have 2,000 more people. So we really do need another well, and we did get some trust fund money to make that happen. So engineering will start on that next year. Likewise, page 72 is our water system issue showed a couple weeks ago. We definitely need additional water storage. I mean, between the 3 main tanks we have about 1 million gallons of water storage. I mean, I've said this at other meetings, but when I was city manager at Colfax, that city of Colfax has 1/3 of the population that we have, yet they have 3 times the amount of water storage volume. So that does show you we have a disconnect. So we need to true that up. So we did get trust fund money to do the engineering. The construction will be quite a bit of money, but it needs to happen. And then well 3 generator. This one JEB's helping us with because we got invited to file a grant for that brick HMA grant, and they'll go put in a generator because go figure, our one good well before we got the other ones online had no generator, so we need to get on that. And then it also needs a coordinator, so it could essentially take the same coordination as the other wells because right now it's a different system. So hopefully we'll get that grant, but we're working towards it. And then page 74 is repainting the Central College Place water tower. We filed a FEMA grant. I'm being told it'll become liquid within the next year or so, but that's going to entail putting in some additional cross bracing, repainting it, and then a new outfall. So that way it would meet current standards, but the lion's share of that would be paid for with FEMA. So that is the booklet. So it's before you for consideration this meeting. And if you all vote to recommend it, then it would go to council for approval. I'll take questions as well as Alex, who's on this call, who is our on-call engineer.
Okay, thank you, Michael. Lot going on there. Does anybody have any questions or comments for Michael or Alex on what was presented?
This is an impressive amount of work and an impressive amount of grant writing. You should be commended for this. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Nancy. I have a question here. You talked about the undersized water overflow.
Yeah.
Where is that planned to be overflowed to? Is that going into dry well in Birch Street, or you're needing that path to get to a route?
So the general plan, and Alex, maybe you could speak more to this, so I don't like completely butcher it, but before Paul Hartwig left, the general plan was to essentially have a pipe go from the water tower, and there's like a little easement where we have an alleyway that goes out to Birch, and then essentially put a new storm line up Birch to the fourth. Because supposedly, from what I was told, there's a large storm line under fourth that then goes to that large Burlingame ditch. Alex, could you maybe confirm what I said on that?
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, I'm not that familiar with this particular project.
Okay.
So I'd have to look a little more on the water system
Okay.
about it.
Okay. The other question I had related to stormwater, because that is an increase in stormwater, but it would be clean stormwater that wouldn't necessarily need to be filtered. Would that amount of water in the overflow be too much for the water treatment plant to handle? That would mess up their chemical mixture, or?
Well, I mean, the city doesn't, like, we have a wastewater treatment plant, but we don't really have like a water treatment plant. We basically pull up all the water from our wells, and then we have the appropriate chlorination systems for it. But it's not like Walla Walla where they have like a surface water treatment plant. We don't have that. We just have.
Right. No, I was just wondering about the overflow, because that's clean water. It's drinking water. Putting it into either the stormwater or the wastewater, if it has to be treated again, I'm not sure, how much overflow are we talking about? And are there provisions in the tower to prevent overflowing the tower?
Well, I mean, I know RH2, they've been working on the plans for that. So I mean that there are provisions that wouldn't overflow, but you're really supposed to design those water tanks where there is an appropriate overflow just in case. And the current one because that tower dates back to the 40s, it's not appropriately sized.
So it's more like an emergency overflow. There's no planned overflow that could happen if pumps fail or okay.
Yeah, they're generally sized for however fast you could potentially fill the tank. So if pump accidentally gets stuck on and automation doesn't shut it off. So it doesn't happen that often, but the Department of Health just wants to see it there just to protect the structure.
All right, thank you. Along those same lines, somewhere in there you were talking about stormwater infiltration galleries.
Yeah.
Being put in the central part of I'm sure it's thought of by JUB, and that's why we have them on board, but at what point, how much can you put in without raising the groundwater level around, as we increase those, as private property aren't allowed to put stormwater into the public system any longer, and you have to maintain that on site? At what point does that come to an aggregate amount that we start raising the groundwater level, or are aquifers appropriate for that type of thing?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, generally speaking, dry wells are a very common way of treating and disposing of stormwater. We don't generally get that much rain here. In the Tri-Cities, especially in Walla Walla College Place, you get a little bit more than us, but dry wells and infiltration trenches are a really common way of disposing of the stormwater. Provides a little bit of treatment, and then it allows it to percolate. So generally speaking, what we're really limited by is how permeable the ground is for receiving the water. And so the city recently hired another firm, Aspect Consulting, to do some percolation tests to see what effect it would have, basically doing a little pilot test for digging a hole, injecting some water in it, and see where it goes. So their study shows that the particular area that they studied anyway is really favorable for using dry well. So it's a really smart way of doing it, as opposed to just dumping it all to the creek like what's being done now,
Right.
and now we have to retrofit all those outfills to add filtration.
Okay. Anybody else?
You-
I have a question or a
Yes, go
comment.
ahead, Dan.
Regarding the fire department, the stairwell project, has anybody considered possibly talking to the Department of Corrections work crew? I know that they recently did some work, I believe in Prescott at a park there. And then they also, and I know that City Hall needs to be painted. They recently did a paint project just ahead of the start of the fair for the county fairgrounds. Just, I wanted to throw that out there.
Yeah, we have looked at that. The problem is because that's like part of the building and L&I rates, that sort of stuff, we actually need to get someone that's like rated and bonded appropriately so the state doesn't have a cow about it. So,
Understandable.
yeah,
Thanks, Mike.
yep.
Okay, Commissioner Selby.
I just had a quick comment on the overflow, emergency overflow.
Mhm.
I think the last time I looked at this, if the water is chlorinated in the tank, then if it's going to end up in the sanitary sewer, if it's going to end up in a stream, we're going to have to dechlorinate. So we should try and make sure that we infiltrate it instead.
Okay.
Or I take that back. We should check the regulations because, the last time I actually did this was like 10 years ago. So
Okay.
things may have changed, but we should check into that.
Yeah, that's definitely something that needs to be considered. Oftentimes the overflows, it's convenient for them to go into irrigation canals or creeks and whatnot. And we found that, and also there needs to be what they call an air gap so that there's no chance of anything, working its way back up into the tank. So there are a couple different ways of handling it. I'm sure that's one of the things RH2 will look at in their design, but it can be as simple as having a little vault where we're able to put some chips in there to help dechlorinate. Really, if you can get a bag of dechlorination tablets and just having the water run over that, oftentimes is all the treatment you need for the dechlorination. That's certainly a consideration. It does need to be dechlorinated before it goes to a surface water.
Okay. Any other comments or questions? Okay, seeing none. A lot of these projects are funded outside of utilities fundings, but there's a good mix throughout. But thanks for sorting that out for us, Michael, in your report. It was very helpful and well put together. Do we have a motion to recommend this on to City Council?
I move we recommend proposed fiscal year 2022 to 2027 capital facility plan to City Council as presented.
Okay, we have a motion. Is there any further comment? Okay, is there a second?
Oh, John, you're on mute.
Second.
Okay, we have a second. All in favor, raise your digital hand. Okay, it has passed. And we will move on to the draft fiscal year 2022 state and federal legislative agenda.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so really with this one, it's just the key parts we'll go over is really the infrastructure priorities. Part to the right are more policy level statements. The only policy level statements I would say directly tie into this body is that the state investing to areas with broadband service gaps, which we have, because there's areas in town here, we're here at City Hall, internet's great. However, a block and a half at my house, it's like 1990s era internet. So that needs to be fixed. Then also strengthening and keeping the monies that are in the state agencies. We depend on like TIB, Public Works Trust Fund, Recreation Conservation Office, CURB, and others. And then alternate compliance pass for wastewater systems pertaining to PCBs. And then phase 8 for Highway 12, getting them to pay for that because the state, and it's in economic development, but the state does need to still pass a transportation package because they were supposed to last year and then they like left town and didn't do it. So that does need to happen hopefully this upcoming year. As far as the key infrastructure priorities, a lot of it I'm sure you could pick up when I was going over the capital facility plan, but the treatment plant, 25 million's a lot of money and we need other people's money to make that happen. Western water, CP water system improvements. So we have the start of the engineering money for it, but we're still gonna have to cobble together the construction. So well number 7, and then the elevated tanks, we believe that's about 3.5 million a piece. Stormwater decant facility, construction engineering, we believe is 1.5 million. I believe ecology will likely pay for all of this, but that it needs to be on this document so we can demonstrate as we're talking to them that we really need them to pony up for that. Southwest College Place, Majania Road at 4.2 million, and then the park at 2 million. I think the park, a lot of that'll be born on developers that go down there. Majania Road, I put that back in here mainly because since a pared down bill passed Congress, we don't know how much we're getting for the construction part of the Majania, so there could be a gap once we know what it is. And then Southeast 12th, we're lobbying Transportation Improvement Board, but getting the first phase, which would be from College of Larch done. So putting in the pedestrian street lamps on one side, ADA ramps, resurface it, new utilities underground, that'd be about 4.3 million. So the left is the key infrastructure priorities, the right is more policy-based stuff. But that is what's before you in the federal legislative agenda is very similar. I would say just a little more vague since the programs are a little more clandestine at the federal level, but quite similar. So I just wanted to get a concurrence vote from this body for both of the agendas.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any questions for that presentation? Okay, is there a motion to recommend approval of the fiscal year 2022 state and federal legislation agenda as presented on to the city council?
Motion to recommend approval of the fiscal year 2022 state and federal legislative agenda as presented to the city council.
Okay, thank you, John. Any comments or on that motion? Questions? Okay, seeing none, looking for a second for that motion. Do I have a
Second.
Okay, we have a second on the motion. Would you please signify by raising your digital hand in support of that motion? And seeing unanimous hands, it passes. Okay, next up, we have a bird scooter renewal presentation.
Hey, so with that, I will turn you over to Garrett and Taylor. You'll see a sheet that shows the success of Bird over the last period of a couple months since 2021 was the inaugural year. So they're seeking a multi-year renewal. With that, I will turn it over to them.
Thank you, Michael. And yeah, as Michael just gave a high level, we are proposing that we file an extension for the current and existing MOU through the next 2 years as well. Currently, our MOU expires at the end of next year. Obviously, doing a year in review, we are very happy with the high level overview success of Bird in College Place based on utilization, day-to-day operations. So with our proposal of extending the MOU over the next 2 years, day-to-day operations will pretty much be the same as you see them today. Taylor, who is your day-to-day point of contact, will still be working with the city, the same fleet manager. We are ultimately just looking to extend the MOU through additional 2 years. Obviously, still at the end of the day, Bird is a data company, so the longer we run operations, the better we get at it, the more trends, the more hard data points we get, and we get to proactively react to those. As that is the city dashboard that Michael and colleagues have access to, showing the hard data and utilization behind where the community is really utilizing this form of transportation. So with that, I kind of just wanted to open up. I do have the same PowerPoint that I kind of ran through when we went through this the first time, if I need to run through that, but kind of want to open up for any questions, concerns, words of wisdom as it is right now.
Okay, thank you. Anybody have any questions for Garrett or Taylor? Or comments? Melody, go.
I appreciate in your report that you have told people, your users, not to block the ADA ramps or the sidewalk. I still occasionally see them parked in such a way that somebody in a wheelchair would not be able to get past.
Yep.
And I would suggest that we do two things, one of which is with the MOU and the other one isn't. One is I would like to see in the MOU that you continue to notify your users not to do that. And then secondly, I think the next time we're looking at some of our regulations, our traffic regulations, we should think about putting in a fine for people who leave scooters or other similar things blocking the sidewalk.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, we have the ability to pass back fines if that is the case and need be. We have implemented a community resource really for this. Every vehicle has a phone number and email address that we get community criticism and feedback as well. But now we have an app. So if you were to download the Bird app, this is free to use. You just hit that triangle. And for that vehicle that you saw on the ADA ramp, all you would have to do is take a picture of it. That actually creates an internal ticket that is sent to our customer service team. We can then see what rider was associated with that Bird and reach out for an educational touch point to hopefully correct the behavior, but also have the ability to assess fines, penalties, suspensions. Also, that creates a ticket and interacts with that local point of contact in real time and triggers a response for that individual to go respond and move that vehicle as well. So we did implement a couple of resources for feedback just like that, so we can be a little bit more proactive on it. Obviously, this is a strategic partnership as well. So proactive messaging, all these riders do get put into an educational funnel where they get hit with in-app messaging, email campaigns, where College Place has the ability to really customize that and really what message do we want to portray the most. And it sounds like if parking at ADA ramps is an issue that you guys are seeing, we can definitely customize some messaging so they see that in-app email campaigns and obviously getting hit with that messaging.
Well, and it sounds like in some of our messaging out to our citizens, we should let people know that, because I've not downloaded the app because I have enough balance issues that me riding a scooter is probably not a good idea. So
Absolutely. Yeah.
but now I realize there's a reason for me to download the app, because I didn't realize about reporting. So that's something that I think the city would have to do, like with Nextdoor or Facebook or whatever.
Yeah.
I also have resources available. Michael, I can send to you that outline clearly how to download the app, how to access and report if needed. So if that would be helpful for the city, I can definitely pass that along.
Yep.
Okay. John, did you have a question along that same line?
Yeah, I've got a couple of questions.
go
The
ahead.
first one is, how difficult is it to reset the software for the scooters such that they can be moved, I don't know, 15, 20 feet without setting off an alarm if they're in a doorway, as has happened on the university campus, or obstructing a sidewalk? The report I'm getting back from people who work on campus is they'll find scooters parked inappropriately, and when someone tries to move it just slightly out of the way, the alarm goes off. So that appears to be problematic, but I would imagine a simple fix. So that's question number one. Question number two, I was gonna
Yeah, we can field that question first. Yeah, number one, the back wheel is locked when the scooter is not in use. Obviously, this really makes the rent into ride. The scooters are only really able to move when you are renting the scooter. If you're able to, you can just tip it onto that front wheel and roll it. If you are trying to move it just a couple feet, if you are working on college and just want to move it out of a doorway or something like that. Taylor, do you have any more experience about delaying that response with the beeping?
Yeah, what I was going to say is this kind of sounds similar to what Melody was bringing up, as maybe there's an issue here. We need to be better about our messaging, right? So I would be happy again to provide more additional details on how to move those. Like Garrett said, you can tip it up on the front wheel and move it. Or if it is an issue, this is something too that I want to be aware of, that I can talk to our local fleet manager about. So if this is something the college is seeing, how do we get that information over so that it creates a ticket so they can come over and address it, right? We want to make sure that we're not creating extra work for anyone on campus. So that would be something that I would also recommend.
Well, yeah, thank you. The obstruction of a doorway or a walkway, for instance, you've got people who will happily attempt to assist and move so that people aren't saying, dag nabbit, those bird scooter people that would just like to move it, 5 feet away from the doorway without waiting on a service person to have to arrive and do it. The obstruction or the hazard is an immediate present concern. So I would recommend, particularly for campus, that the word on how to tip it up on the front so that it can be moved, get to the college relations people who can disseminate that message pretty quickly on campus. It's been a problem on several occasions that I've heard about. So you got people who are willing to help. Then I've got one more question.
John, on that same line, I have found going into our buildings a lot that I can move them 8 to 10 feet and it gets progressively harder until it completely locks up. The alarm does go off, but I don't care, and I do move them. And it gets harder and harder the farther you go, and then it finally does lock up, but it does give you 8 or 10 feet, I've noticed, and that's usually far enough to get it out of harm's way. And but
Yeah,
I think
so
your point is well taken, because there's a lot of people that can't lift those. I don't know what they weigh. They're probably around 30 some pounds.
44 pounds.
44, yeah.
Yeah,
I guess I was stronger than I thought.
So I don't know if it's possible. My original brainstorm was, set it rather than to go off immediately so you got 15 seconds or something, so somebody actually could move the thing at least until the wheel locks up without setting off an alarm. The alarm was what I heard about, and that was to the person who attempted to move it out of the doorway. That was alarming.
Yeah, and I think that just comes back down to education and educating. Maybe we do a lunch and learn with the university on kind of what our operations look like, and then kind of quick fixes like that. I believe the alarm is just associated with the back wheel. So if you do tip it onto the front, that alarm is not going to happen. And also that front wheel never locks. So you'll never have that hard, not be able to move it as well. So just kind of educating these community tips and tricks is it sounds like we need to do a little bit better job on. And obviously we love when people are helping out scooter operations and moving them out of doorways as the, but also communicating that we have that community mode where we can do reporting as well.
And can you adjust that? I mean, this is in the deep weeds, I know, but can you adjust the delay on that alarm?
I have never heard of that.
I don't
That is a
believe so.
question. Yeah, that is a question we can ask our vehicle ops and engineering team to see if that is a possibility.
Something else we can do too in terms of education is similarly to how Garrett was mentioning that we could do more targeted messaging around not blocking ADA ramps. We can actually set up messaging that's specifically on campus. So if you're riding a bird within the vicinity of campus, we can have additional messaging that's specific to them as well. So again, kind of maybe education on the people who are working on campus as well as our riders themselves so that we can target these issues as they come up.
Thank you.
Something like, really? With a question mark. Did you do that? Did you park there? Really?
Aren't you in college? Question mark.
So one more question. And by the way, I like the scooters. I'm not sure at my age I'm going to become a frequent flyer, but I like them. My question has to do with the benefit to the city of College Place. Is there sales tax applied that accrues to the city, or a use fee percentage? What do we get out of it as a municipality?
Yeah, absolutely. Of course, at high level, it's a no cost micromobility option for the city. So you guys did not have to pay Bird to come to your community to bring a new sustainable open air form of transportation. Secondly, sales tax is run through that fleet manager who's running operations. They actually form a corporation and they are taxed on their sales. Obviously, same with the daily revenue. Lastly, it's just more the sustainability. So cutting down on unnecessary car trips, lessening your carbon footprint. So I would say those three are really the number 1, 2, and 3 top priorities and benefits for your community right now.
Thanks. Knowing that makes me like the scooters even more.
Okay, Nancy.
Yes, I just wanted to say I'm kind of like Melody. I don't trust myself on one of those things, but I would like to know if only college students are using them, or do you see members of the general public using them as well?
Yeah, as you can see, there's kind of that heat map right there. Taylor, do you have any more like specific of demographics of who's using them?
Yeah, we see a lot of different people using them in College Place. So we unfortunately can't share demographic data just for privacy for riders, but it is not only college students. Another figure that's great that's not on this sheet too is that we have about 250 average commuters right now we're seeing a month. And when I say commuters, I mean people going from the same point A to point B in the AM hours or PM hours. So when we go back to this being another reliable form of transportation, outside of maybe a recreational, there are also a lot of members of the community who are seeing now consistently that figure growing of people relying on this as a method of transportation. And that's not just college students.
Okay, Dan.
Yeah, I had a question. Is there a general usage area for the Bird scooters, or is it basically anywhere within the city limits of College Place? And the reason for my question is looking at your map, I actually live south of 125. So in that map, I've seen 4 in just the last 2 weeks south on the sidewalk there off of Tomarison. And I was just surprised to see them there.
So the city limits is the general operating area that we work within. As far as where the birds are deployed, that does shift depending on demand. So we have our local fleet manager go out and deploy and rebalance the birds. So as they need charging, and you'll notice they'll kind of move around throughout the day. We have a live map that the city does have access to see where they are at any given time. And then as they're rebalanced and redeployed, they are shifted around the city so that we can best serve wherever people are using them and riding them.
All right. Yeah, fortunately, that particular area where I'm seeing them, we have a rather large bike lane as well as a rather large sidewalk. People also ride their horses out there. So I don't really question too much out there.
Okay.
But seeing 4 in 2 weeks, I was a little surprised because I hadn't seen them in that neighborhood until recently.
Sure. Again, one of the things that we try and do is understand where the riders are coming from. So as our data, I think Garrett mentioned earlier, the longer we are somewhere, the more we start to kind of see rider patterns, or if rides are ending somewhere, we're getting requests from our local fleet manager saying, we're hearing riders say we want to service this particular area. We do our best to accommodate. If there are any concerns about that, we can always adjust. But as it stands now, we just reflect what we're seeing as far as ridership demand.
All right, thank you. And I appreciate the explanation of how the app works.
Absolutely.
How many scooters do we have in College Place currently? How many get deployed daily?
So you'll see on this, we say number of birds 50. That number is somewhat of an average. When we're talking about how many birds are deployed, it's different than how many birds are actually going to be in College Place. Deployed is how many are on the street, right? How many are actually in use or available for riders. Yeah, we have a lot more that need to be charged. So it's always kind of, you will see the number fluctuate. Similarly, maybe on certain times of days or certain days of the week, the number might go up or down, again, depending on what that data is. What we always try and do is make sure that we have the correct amount out so that there's not too many sitting unused, but that we are always able to work with the demand of the College Place residents.
Yeah, and George, something that I just use as kind of rule of thumb is like picture maybe 75% of those being out at one time while the other ones are being charged or repaired for damages as well. So maybe on a high average 40, but probably closer to 35, 40.
Yeah, very good.
That's pretty impressive, really. Thank you so much for the education.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, any more questions or comments before we ask for a motion of Garrett and Taylor? Okay, is there a motion to recommend the renewal of the memorandum of understanding with Bird Rides?
I move that we recommend the renewal of the MOU with Bird Rides.
Okay, any further discussion amongst?
This is Commissioner Shelby. I would like to see an amendment about the ADA education. I mean, I know they've been doing it, so I don't think it's a problem, but just for when people change, I want to make sure that that's a part of it. I think it's important.
Sounds like probably not putting them in doorways and such too, maybe like a training component.
Yeah. Maybe it's
Okay.
just with the addition of a training component about where to leave, appropriate places to leave the birds.
Okay, with that additional recommendation, Nancy, does your motion still stand?
It does.
Okay, and is there a second to that?
I'll second.
Okay. All those in favor of that motion with the added comment to recommend a parking location due to ADA conflicts, raise your digital hand, please. Okay, seeing that it's unanimous, that carries on to the council. Thank you. Thank you for your presentation, Garrett and Taylor,
Awesome.
and
Thank
for
you.
continuing to be a part of our community with that. I think it has been favorable, and I work at the university here, so I do see them all over. I can attest to their robustness because every once in a while I see 3 people on one going down the street, and I'm just like, oh my goodness. But
Earmuffs.
that's only rare. So anyway.
How many have you lost? Or have gotten severely damaged?
We call that churn. So it's a churn rate, which essentially is what is the percentage. It is incredibly low. I don't know if you have the statistics off the top of your head, Garrett, but I actually follow, so my job, I work directly with our local fleet manager who runs the program day to day on the ground. And I get all of the feedback coming in and it has been minimal. And again, Garrett, I don't know if you have actual statistics there,
I'm
but
not on hand, I'm sorry.
yeah, and I think that
Compare-
speaks to the residents of College Place too. Every city is different. So that's always a big thumbs up in our book.
Good, thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, College Place.
Thank
All
you all
right.
so much. We appreciate it.
Thanks for joining us. All right, next we have on our regular agenda is street lighting. And I think Robert is going to present that.
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, I mean, I guess where this kind of started is it seems like as you guys probably all know, I'm relatively new to City College Place, and it seems like there just really hasn't necessarily been a priority in the city for lighting. There's definitely lighting at some intersections, and there's definitely some very dark spots throughout the city. And so somewhat recently, we had some concerns expressed to us about safety, particularly around speeding. And as we started to review that, we noticed some of those areas were some of the areas that are particularly dark at night. And so we started considering, well, maybe we ought to look at putting some more streetlights in. I reached out to Pacific Power and got an estimate for, I think it was for 6 streetlights, which were primarily along the Larch corridor. So Larch and C Street were kind of the 2 main areas of focus that came up recently. Not to say that that's the only places in the city that might need streetlights, but regardless, the estimate was for roughly about $6,700 to install 6 streetlights. I think 5 of those were on Larch, and 1 of those was actually on Southwest 12th. So, I mean, trying to figure out priorities moving forward, I thought it'd be good to reach out to you guys, discuss it with you, and kind of seek input on what the priorities for street lighting would be. So yeah, this is, I think Mike was kind enough to take some pictures when he was out riding his bike recently. And you can see how dark some of those areas on Larch are. I think that's facing north, approaching 6th Street. And this one's at right around the Garrison Village Way. So yeah, I guess I'm interested in where you guys stand on street lighting, and we haven't historically budgeted for adding streetlights aside from the major projects. College Avenue 4 Bikes project that's coming up real soon will include a lot of street lighting along 4th Avenue, and those are always good opportunities to add lighting. But outside of those bigger projects, I'm interested in, you know, if you guys are supportive of moving forward with this lighting along Larch, or if there's other areas of concern, or if it's just not a priority.
And a couple things I'll add. So those roads are on the Blue Mountain Regional Trails plan. So I mean, those are the key bike routes in town, in areas where we've been getting comments and emails, and I ride my bike at night too, because that's when I tend to get out. So I've been getting pictures of it. But Larch, basically between 3rd and 8th, and we're starting to get a speeding issue there. And I think part of it is the environment where it's pitch black, so people feel they can gun it through there. And then also, one of the things I didn't realize until I started riding at night, because it gives off the perception that there is lights, but there actually isn't, is on Northeast C Street from Maple all the way to Home Depot. If you go in there, there actually isn't a single street light in that duration. I only started to notice that once I started riding my bike at night. And then also Whitman's in the same boat.
And C Street, the only reason it's not included in this initial estimate is those lights, those power poles, existing utility poles, are Columbia REA. And we've reached out to them, haven't heard back yet, so I need to follow up with them. But I did coordinate efforts with Pacific Power on the ones on Larch. So we have to assume the costs would be similar I kind of took an average of around, you know, 11 to 1,200 bucks per light, and that's assuming you can put the lighting on existing wood utility poles.
And then one last thing I would add too, there is room to pay for this out of the REIT 1 account, which we've been paying our chip seal and our overlay with. And the reason this is before you is because there hasn't really ever been a conversation about this ever since I've been here.
Have you thought about doing anything on 12th? And will that Larch Street light impact 12th? I mean, it would seem like it might create a little bit more lighting.
Well, I mean, I can't have about 12th Street. I mean, the concept is that we put in for a TIB grant, and the idea is that as we redo 12th Street, we would put in pedestrian street lights, very similar to like 4th Street, how we're going to be doing that with 4 bikes. So 12th over time is actually going to take care of itself. The areas we really don't have a discernible plan is that Whitman corridor, Larch, and then that weird part of the C Street from Maple to Myra that has nothing.
Dan, go ahead with your question.
Yeah, you were muted there, George. Thank you. I wanted to ask Mike about the area, and Robert, thanks. I do think this is a priority and something that the city should look into, but I wanted to ask about the area around Lamperty and Meadowbrook. I have had a couple of close calls there. Previous job, I was a commuter, and coming through that area, I can't tell you how many times I've almost hit somebody there. You're tired, you're driving in from out of town, that kind of thing, but the lighting not that good. But can Walmart help with that, or is that something that would be Walmart's responsibility?
I mean, we can ask Walmart to help as far as it being their responsibility. It wasn't really a development condition back when they put it in or putting additions, so there isn't really a way to compel them. However, there are available parcels around Half Thief that are still available for sale. And I will say, as those develop, we could potentially put it as a development condition for that.
Okay, and I apologize. I have not been through there with the time change and the dark nights and stuff recently. And I know that Lamperty got redone here, this past year or so.
Yeah.
So I don't know if anything improved, but I do know that it scared me going through there. And after a couple of close calls, you know, having to pay closer attention. But yes, I think Robert, I think this is a priority. That's my 2 cents.
Okay, Commissioner Selby and then Commissioner Kress.
Thank you. I think this is a priority, but I have a couple of caveats. So one of the things, and I'm not sure if our current lights that we're doing do this, is we do have an observatory in town. It's not used that often anymore, but anything that lights up the night sky more makes it more difficult. So it would be, and Whitman also has an observatory. So there are ways that you can make sure that the lights go down rather than up. And so I think we need to take that into account. And secondly, I think it would be, as far as prioritizing, you know, when I used to live on 10th, I've had terrible experiences going up and down Bade, especially where there weren't any sidewalks. And, you know, we'll just run across in front of you that are all dressed in black. And it's like, yes, I realize that, you know, we probably should take you out of the gene pool, but, you know, sorry, that was a little harsh, but so I think what we ought to do for prioritizing is look at our crime statistics and the accident statistics in that report that we just did, and use those to prioritize putting in lights that aren't part of a new street. Like when we're putting in the sidewalks on Bade, I assume we'll put in lights too. At least I hope so. So, but there are some places where I think we probably are going to want to do that without waiting for the big street upgrade.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
That does make sense. I would mention that the language centered around C Street and Larch, that ties to areas that were called out in that local road safety plan, which is why that is suggested as such. Because in both those corridors, it's going to be over a decade until a major project happens. So that's why it should probably be a standalone thing.
Well, and my other comment is, although we can't compel businesses to, help out with that, I think as given how much of the year it gets dark extremely early, and given the blue zones wanting to encourage moving around, I think as we might want to reach out to blue zones and our local businesses and, kind of make it a funding priority for them. So, sponsor a lamp kind of a thing. I don't know, just a thought.
Okay, John.
Yeah, I'm thinking of energy. I'm noticing, the streetlights will increase the city's power bill somewhere, that clause in the notes. What energy efficient options are available? And my guess is those are prioritized already. But LED technology, I'm wondering even if there is an option for solar powering LEDs so that impact on our utilities budget is minimal. And at that point, I'm wondering if there is any consideration or any value in considering city ownership of new streetlights rather than the power companies owning those, particularly if they can be run very efficiently.
I mean, that's a potential option. It's just the maintenance of them once you own all of them. Speaking as someone that did that in Colfax is a bit of a headache. So that is something that gives me a little bit of heartburn thinking back on that. But one of the things I will say, as far as converting the lights, every single light owned either by the city, REA, or Pacific Power has been converted to LED. We got grants for that 3 years ago, about $200,000 in grant money, where every single light was changed over. So if you look at past utility bills, our costs dropped about roughly 40% after we did that. So we are doing that from a sustainability perspective. Where we're at now pretty much is just the fact that there are key areas that just we never touched with the lighting. It's starting to trigger other issues such as speeding and people just driving dumb. So
yeah, to add to that, the LEDs are very energy efficient. I don't know the cost to run one, but the reason I put that caveat that it would increase somewhat is, pennies all add up. And so if it became a priority that we're going to put lights everywhere, then obviously, even though it's a little bit at a time for each light, there's, it adds up to somewhat of a cost at some point. So.
Well, I'm glad to hear the report, and I probably heard it before, but glad to be reminded of the LED transition that's already occurred. What do we know, if anything, about solar options as those technologies improve?
I'm not aware of solar streetlights. I imagine they probably exist, so it might be worth looking at.
Yeah. Oh, before I recognize Nancy there, I just want to add a little bit about the LED lights that were put in. I was just talking with Marty Scott, and that might be a name, Robert, that you might reach out to. He manages both the university observatory and does work in the Whitman observatory.
What was his name again? Sorry.
Marty Scott. Marty Scott. Yeah. And I can get you some contact information. I was just speaking to it with him about the other day,
Okay.
and he had noticed that the street lamps, as they were replaced, those LEDs are more concise cut and have downlighting much more. So that's good. One thing I have noticed about some, and I don't know whether it's ones that they've been more recently replacing as the other ones have started to fail or go out, or if they're ones that are failing that are turning that nice, pretty purple color. It really takes the definition away, unfortunately, of the, the amount of light spectrum that you have to bounce back light from the more multiple colors of objects. I was just kind of curious about that because I've noticed it more and more.
Those purple ones were bad batch that Pacific Power got. We've had a whole bunch of them that I've reported to them.
Good.
Pacific Power has replied back that some of them have been replaced. I've continued to notice some. Just a week or so ago sent them a list of probably 15 lights throughout the city that
good to know.
So we're working to get those replaced, and yeah, they're not supposed to be that purple color.
Okay, Nancy, and then Melody, and then we'll attempt to do a action here maybe.
So I'm a light person, so I love lighting, the lighting idea. I just want to, as the person that works with people that gripe all the time, recognize that maybe we should have a little public input on this, because I don't live on 12th Street or Larch Street, and you're going to be having some people calling in and complaining. So just to be mindful of that, we need to have some public input probably.
Okay, Melody?
Mine is similar, actually. I was just remembering the last time we did a big upgrade, and one of the complaints I got from constituents is, now there's a light that goes straight into my bedroom window. And I'm like, well, I bought curtains, but I think Nancy's right. We do need to, take that into account. And basically, I think it's talking to people so that they have some input in exactly where on the street it goes.
Sure. There's limitations on where we can put them. We're going to go with existing utility poles, which can be part of the problem. And I know Pacific Power has graciously jumped on it to go out and put shields on some of the lights when we've had complaints, if you will, about it's shining too bright through my window. And there's options along those lines. As somebody alluded to earlier, the LEDs really do shine down a lot more than the old style lighting.
The new reflectors can handle that even on the backside, the cut lines are very sharp to the back of the sidewalk and those kinds of things. I was just noticing that I kind of concur with these main areas, and obviously this amount of dollars is not going to cover the city in light. But if we commit each year to this much, we can have a yearly kind of, okay, what's next after we hit these most dark that don't have any lights? And after a while, we can start picking up the pieces that have okay lighting, but we just add to it. So I'm kind of an advocate of this approach to hit these areas that have none, that have high traffic area, and branch out from there a little bit every year, and you'll eventually get it. And as you do the funding for streets, as you have been doing, whole streets takes big chunks away too. So I advocate for this approach, and caring for as much as you can with the dollars. Some years the dollars won't go as far as other years because the poles or the transformers might not be in the right configurations to put drop lines to the lights, or they might have to add a transformer to pick up 3 lights or something to that nature. So it's not something you're going to get the exact same amount of lighting every year for the same amount of money, but yet you're still moving to a goal, and I like that approach. All right. Any other quick comment or question, or I would entertain a motion at this time as well. I can make a motion. I make a motion to recommend that the city council authorize the addition of new streetlights as proposed.
I will second.
Okay, is there any further comment? All in favor of passing this proposal on to city council for consideration as first and second, raise your digital hand. Okay, seeing that it's unanimous, that passes. Thank you very much for that discussion, Robert, and addition to our city.
Thank you.
And next, we have a report from Basin Disposal, the annual rate report. Rebecca.
I will. Can someone give me the opportunity to share my screen? It still says I cannot share while other participant is sharing. So
Let's see.
there we go. Okay. Nope, I don't go there yet. It still says someone else is sharing. Is that you, George?
No.
I'm seeing it on my screen.
Are you? You're seeing Basin
Yes.
Disposal?
The annual
Yeah.
report,
I
right?
see it.
Fantastic. Okay, well, to start with, thank you so much for having me. I know that you're probably used to seeing Derek, and today you're seeing me. I'm Rebecca Francic. My background is I'm a 21-year former Pasco City Council member. I spent 12 years on the Association of Washington Cities Board. 12 years on the Washington State Public Works Trust Fund, so I know a lot of the projects that you've been working on for years. And I also spent 8 years on the Freight Mobility Strategic Investment Board, so it was pretty exciting to sit through the beginning of your presentation and look at all the infrastructure you're working on. I have another meeting that I have to be to at 4 o'clock, so I'm going to very briefly go over the rate increase, because what I'd really like to do is talk to you about recycling, if that's okay with you. The rate increases are basically just a courtesy because they are part of your contract. So this is what I want you to know about those. First of all, Sudbury has instituted a rate increase, and I'm sure you're not surprised. Inflation is going up everywhere. And so you are going to have actually a 20% discount from Basin, because we only raise our rates 80% of CPI. And Sudbury is raising their rate. We do not apply the CPI to Sudbury. We just pass it straight on to you. And so here is your overall disposal component. It's going to be a 3% increase. Your service component, that's Basin, the people that pick up your garbage, that's a 4.8% increase. But overall, it averages out to 4.1. And what does that mean to you in real terms? Well, your 96-gallon cart is going to be $26.53 one time per week. Your commercial is 4 yards is going to be $342.21. And your industrial fee disposal per ton is going to be $112.69. Are there any questions before I zip in? And I know I'm going fast, so if you need me to slow down, just say so.
I have a question.
Sure.
Is the smaller cart still available to those residents that need it, either for less garbage or the inability to move a large cart?
Yes, it is. And I'm sorry I don't have those rates here.
Okay.
But they are still available, and they would be subject to the same
Sure.
increase, just proportionately
Thank you.
less. Anyone else? Oh, go ahead, Melody.
Do you know much about recycling? Because I have a question about recycling, and I don't know if.
Well, I have been a proponent of recycling for a long time, and the next 18 slides are all about recycling. So I would tell you I'm a novice, but I've done a lot of research recently.
Okay, well, my quick question basically is, I mean, we stopped recycling because recycling wasn't actually happening. We stopped offering it, I should say. And I've just noticed that Walla Walla Recycling has reinstated a bin for plain paper. And I'm wondering if you know if that's actually found a market, so I should start saving it, or
Yes. Paper is recyclable and it does have a market.
Yeah, because there for a while after the Operation whatever sword thing, it didn't. So
Right.
thank you.
You bet. Anybody else before I move on to recycling? Well, let's get started then. So first of all, the question I'm going to ask you is, Basin has wanted to do recycling for a very long time. Commingled recycling is not efficient and it doesn't really work. So the question I want to ask you tonight is, if we go forward with a recycling program in College Place, do you want to do real recycling or do you just want to pretend? And it makes a difference what your answer is. It really does. If you are interested in real recycling, Basin would really like to work with you. And so we would invite you to start this journey with us together. Now, again, I'm a little truncated on time. So this is mostly to get your ideas, see where your priorities are, and maybe I can come back and meet with you again. But I want to get you thinking about where we might position ourselves in the future. So this is what we know. We know that College Place wants to recycle because you did it before. But when the market went up in March of 2018, you canceled it. That's the one thing you have to understand about recycling. These markets are extremely volatile. Garbage is very stable, but what you are recycling today, you might not be able to recycle next month. And so that means if you are going to do real recycling, you have to have the fortitude and the courage to say, okay, I know we took newspapers last week, but we're not taking them this month. There is no market for it. So let's just start with what can be recycled. Newspapers can be recycled. And if you have just straight newspapers without all the glossy paper in it, it's the highest value paper recycling there is. Mixed paper can be recycled. And corrugated cardboard, which everybody who gets Amazon, these are really valuable. Aluminum and tin cans are still very valuable. There's 1 and 2 plastics and non-heat treated glass. Now let's see what the reality of that is. Realistically, glass is not worth recycling. The reports I've seen, and I've asked Derek to verify this, but if you put in 5 grams of heat treated glass into a ton of real glass, you've contaminated the whole batch. It does not take much to throw the whole system out. And realistically, plastics aren't working because people keep contaminating the stream. And I would tell you, I don't think it's their fault. Those little arrows on the bottom that say 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, that was very carefully calculated to make you think that you were buying a recycled product, but you weren't. 1 and 2 are recyclable, although I have to tell you right now, virgin product is cheaper and provides a better product than recycled plastic. As gas continues to go up in price, that may shift. So I would tell you that if you're going to think about recycling, I would leave glass and I would leave plastic out, at least at the beginning. Contaminated recycling streams are garbage. You're spending, I think it's $63 a ton to dump your garbage. You spend $150 a ton to go and have your recycling processed. But if it has to be thrown out, you've just wasted your money, basically. I want you to look at, I'm pretty sure most of these are not recycling products, but look at this glass. There are only 2 things on this picture that are actually recyclable. Do you know which ones they are?
The light bulb and the wine bottle.
Nope. The only ones that are recyclable are the wine bottle and this glass right here. This glass has been heat treated. If you drop it on the floor, it breaks into little cubes. This is heat treated. Oh, I have 3 things. This is a mason jar. It's recyclable. Pyrex, not recyclable. China, not recyclable. This is not recyclable because you've got all these metal and other components. And this is ceramic. It's also not recyclable. But people say it's glass, and they're not wrong, but they throw it all together and then you don't have recycling. So we have seen a real phenomenon in the recycling market, and it's called wishful recycling. And I guess the message I really want to deliver to you today is wishing it to be so doesn't make it true. It is the quality of what you're recycling not the volume that matters. And I was lucky enough to go to a place over on the east side where they do compost. And I mean, it's an amazing product, and they come out with an amazing dirt. But I asked my sister, who lives very close, why she doesn't do that. And she said, because it still has little bits of plastic, and I don't want that in my yard. So it is the quality, not the volume, that actually matters. This is what we know about recycling. First of all, real recycling means used objects are being turned into something useful. It costs money. Everybody thinks you're going to make money on recycling. That's very rarely true. It rarely makes a profit, and that is basin disposal, speaking with 20 years of experience. But it is the right thing to do. At least Basin believes it's the right thing to do. And I think we have a lot of citizens in our community that also believe it's the right thing to do. So if we institute a recycling program, it has to be kept clean. It must be non-contaminated. It must have a market, and it's going to be volatile. So sometimes you'll be recycling newspapers and sometimes you won't. And again, this is a mindset that's really going to have to resonate with people. There's a woman who says, if in doubt, throw it out. That's got to be the new mantra. If you do not know 100% that what you have is recyclable, throw it out, because it's the quality, not the volume, that matters. So Melody, you were asking about the Walla Walla SWAC. We are basing a lot of our decisions and thoughts a lot on Walla Walla, because they have done a tremendous amount of research, trying things and deciding what worked and what didn't. What they have said is no plastics. We cannot keep the contamination out. People recycle things that are recyclable, but they put them in plastic bags. The plastic bags make it non-recyclable. The question, oh, and glass. They are looking at glass right now. I will tell you that there's a lot of reasons not to go with glass, but it's not that it's not recyclable. So we'll talk about that later. Before you if you decide to recycle though, what you have to decide is, would you feel good with a single cart that's perhaps only picked up once a month with clean recycling? And then the next question would be, how price conscious are you? Because it costs money. So cleanliness and careful selection will reduce your costs. So again, Basin wants to recycle with you. We've been throwing a whole bunch of ideas out on the wall, trying to figure out what sticks. And we just think that maybe we need a new model. And this is where I need your thinking involved. I need your ideas. We're thinking, first of all, as you probably know, there's a driver shortage. There are truck shortages. So maybe what we need is something with smaller trucks. Maybe we have pickups that pull gooseneck trailers around and just pick up your newspaper. Or maybe we have smaller trucks with goosenecks that just go around and pick up your tin cans. And then, we shuttle those back and forth. One idea. Nothing set in sand here, just things that we're thinking about. And then there's this whole question about flexible collection. So for instance, at my house, there will never be pop cans at my house. We don't drink it. But I have 3 newspapers I take a day. So there's a lot of newspaper. So what if we had a flexible model where all I recycled are newspapers and mixed paper? Could we do that? Well, why not? Maybe I do newspapers, mixed paper, and corrugated cardboard, but nothing else. Could we do that? What if you just wanted to do corrugated cardboard? It's possible. And then what would the price impacts of that be? Now, the next thing we have to talk about is green waste. And the reason this is an important thing to think about is because of the legislative process. I'm sure you've all heard Biden say that he wants to reduce greenhouse gases. We're trying to get to zero America by 2030, I think. And one of the biggest problems we have is methane, which is generated by green waste going into, in large part, is generated by methane going into our landfills. The problem with compost is, number one, you got to keep it clean. It absolutely has to be. You can't gather your leaves in a black garbage sack and then throw it in. You can't have those black sacks in there. And then secondly, who's going to commit to using it? So Mona Das, Senator Mona Das she's part of a group called Zero Washington, I think, has told us that there is legislation coming that says we will all be doing compost. And if that's true, there's also a component that requires that cities commit to keeping it. So you would put it on your parks, you would put it on your baseball fields, you would make it available for your citizens. That's something that it isn't legislated yet, but I believe it's coming, something to think about. And would we like to be ahead of the push? But that brings us back to, how are we going to pay for it? Some communities say, well, only the people that want to are going to pay for this, and everybody else can just put things in the garbage. And we know that that way we'll get cleaner recycling because people that are committed do it right. If you elected to do that, you could count on about 27 to 30% of your population doing recycling. But if there is a shortfall, are you going to be willing to raise the garbage rates to fund any shortfalls there are? If you have a universal subscription and say, you know what, this is for the betterment of the planet, everybody's going to pay the price no matter what. You don't have to recycle, because if you're in doubt, throw it out. But it's cheaper for everybody if you pay. And so maybe you bump your 27 to 30% up to 33%. That's a guess. That is not scientifically validated. I also think we have to plan for the future. So Walla Walla is looking at recycling glass. And I think that you, as a community, your city planner, somebody should be part of that SWAC. You should be talking about, what if we create a regional program? That probably would be more efficient, more effective, and it would train a community in a much larger geographic region how to recycle. It would make it consistent. That's a problem that we see, especially with the labeling on those big dumpster containers. You know, someone will say we take plastic and others say we don't. Well, what happens is they just pick up those big yard containers and take them. And then when they put them back down, they're not necessarily labeled in the right places at the right time. If everybody's doing the same recycling program, you'd have a little more consistency. I want to go back to glass. If you decide that you want to recycle glass, which is recyclable, it takes special equipment. And that means that some point in the process where the price may really drop, you're going to want to toggle it off and say, nope, we don't want to do this. And you have that ability in your contract to toggle on and off different commodities, but you will still have to pay for any specialized equipment. So you really want to think carefully about which commodities you decide to recycle. And as a longtime educator, my recommendation would be start where it's easy, train people right, and then add something that's more complex later. But it takes people a long time to get things right. So if you decide that you want to go forward with recycling, I think you do have to ask yourself these questions. Do you have the courage and the flexibility to stop recycling a product when it has no market? Can you commit to keeping your recycling clean with no contamination? And I will tell you, Derek and I have had a disagreement about this. He said it can't be done. And I said, you know what? It's time for America to grow up. We can do a lot of things. People can learn to keep their recycling clean. So this is my challenge to you as a community, and my own community, who I'm giving this presentation to next. Are you willing to pay the true cost of recycling? And are you willing to subsidize the shortfalls through the entire population's rates or through surcharges? Then the next thing you need to know is, will you feel successful if you only recycle a small number of items, but it results in a clean, thoroughly recycled product, versus throwing everything into a commingled bin and knowing that you're losing a large percent of that to garbage? Remember, I'm saying this over and over because I want you to remember it. Quality is more important than quantity. If we instituted this, one of the other things we thought about is, well, what about a continuous feedback loop, reporting the cleanness of your recycling? You know, let's say the Pine area, they've got a 98% clean rate. And down here in this section, well, only 50% of their stuff was clean. Not as a embarrassment, but as a, how do you educate people? How do you train them that they're doing it right or wrong if you don't have real metrics to show them This is what the problem was. Somebody kept putting plastic bags in the recycled leaves. This approach is not commingled. It takes more trucks. It's probably going to take more basin people because they're going to have to inspect the recycling. So it might cost a bit more than you're used to paying, but you would be doing real recycling. You'd get better service, better quality, and a better product. So those are the things we've been kicking around. Again, I'm speaking in this very passionate voice, but really these are just ideas we're throwing on the table, and we are really interested in what you have to throw on the table to join us.
All right, Rebecca, thank you for that very spirited presentation. Does anybody have any questions for Rebecca? Dan, go ahead.
All right. On page 16, you were talking about the recyclable bins, and I have two. You were mentioning the monthly. Would we do it monthly? I fill that up in days, and I don't blame BDI. I don't blame the city. I blame the manufacturers in the packaging. The packaging, I think, is a big problem. That said, what is BDI doing to lobby, I guess, our local retailers to look at providing recyclable material? You mentioned Amazon boxes. I imagine in College Place with the college, these kids are buying lots of things. I'm buying lots of things. But the once a month thing, I use I think I went out and bought a 96-gallon bin for my recyclables, and I take it to the landfill because the city does not have a recycling program. So my question is, I don't think once a month is enough, especially when you have a family of 4.
I would actually agree with you on that, because we are finding that in other communities where we're talking about recycling, they're saying, get rid of everything else. We just want containers for our cardboard. So my gut feeling is you're probably right. I don't know if you've heard, but Pasco has 2 Amazon distributors coming our direction. So we're very much trying to figure out what this is going to look like. And I will also tell you, Derek said, the problem is people don't break them down. And I said, Derek, I was at the recycling. We have a big common recycling areas where you take your stuff. I said, I tried to break it down. Me and my X-Acto knife did everything we could. I could not break. I did not have the physical strength to break some of those boxes down. I just couldn't do it with an X-Acto knife. So that's another problem, is it's not always going to be nice and flat. So thank you.
Okay, Melody.
A few thoughts. I agree with the start small. In the 35 years approximately that I've been recycling, the 2 things that have had a consistent market are corrugated cardboard and aluminum. And so I would personally start there. And, maybe we have a paper that turns on and off according to what's, what the current thinking is, or the current market is. The other thing is, when you first talked about flexible, I was picturing like an app where I could just say, okay, put me on the tin can route this week, because some things at some times of the year, around Christmas and around the start of school, I have lots of corrugated cardboard, and then it drops off and it takes me a while to fill it up. And tin cans, same thing. No, sorry, my cat is trying to destroy my computer. So being able to say this week, yes or no, on like an app would be really helpful for me, because my stream is not steady at all. And I do think I really like the idea of feedback on, the cleanliness and usefulness. I'll be honest, I am much more interested in whether or not it actually gets recycled than I am on price. I understand that I'm an outlier, but I have a presentation entitled "Why Did College Place Stop Recycling?" And I say, well, the problem started back in the mid 80s when we started doing mixed recycling. And we, the US, not college, please. So I guess my thoughts are, I really want to recycle if it actually gets recycled. I strongly believe in order to do that, you're going to have separated. And I think we should start small with just one or two things. And as much flexibility as possible is going to help.
I love your ideas of an app. My daughter works for Amazon. And she said, why don't you just have QR codes on every product so you can immediately check to see if it is recyclable? And I thought, my gosh, why not?
Well, and one of the things we might think about in future legislative priorities is, in Europe, or in the EU, excuse me, the manufacturers pay to recycle the packaging. And so they are then motivated to make sure that it's easiest to recycle as possible. And so ideas like that, I think, are going to happen on a bigger scale than, a couple of small towns in
I
Washington.
think that is happening somewhere because I was at Costco yesterday and I went to get apples, and I hate buying apples in those plastic containers. And you know what? They were all in cardboard. I was so shocked. It was like, whoa, this is great. So I think that push is happening.
Well, I just a comment on recycling versus new and other things. I think that, there's a more global look that we have to look at. And usually when the price to recycle goes up, it's because of the raw materials it takes to produce a product from the recycling. And it usually takes less product, less carbon footprint even to make new. And those prices fluctuate based on markets to do such. And I think maybe the bigger question here locally for us would be, what are we saving that's not going into our landfills, which are a high cost facility? And there's a finite amount of space in our landfills. And so we need to preserve that space, and they're expensive per pound of garbage. And what can we do to take these products that are cheaper to recycle? Plastics isn't typically one of them. You have to add a lot of heat and other things, which creates a carbon footprint, and you have to truck it clear to a facility that can do that, and clear back to a facility that can use the product, and then back to there's a whole big network of things that produces carbon footprint. And ultimately that's our goal, is to reduce our carbon footprint. And the consumer will pay the cost either way, whether we tell the retailers to pay for their packaging, to recycle their packaging, that gets passed on. So we either pay it in utilities, or we pay it in costs of our product, or those kinds of things. But I think there is maybe some quick wins locally, as Melody suggested, maybe cardboard and aluminum, because you can determine whether that's clean or not pretty easily. And some of those kinds of things. I'm in a unique position here because I'm a designee to this committee by the university, but I live in Walla Walla. So I have a recycle can in Walla Walla, and I have reduced my garbage. My garbage usually has maybe 1 or 2 kitchen bags in it, when they pick it up. And my recycle is full every time. I'm stuffing it, trying to get, and they're only taking cardboard and paper right now.
Right.
And I figure I'm doing my deed to remove that stuff out of the landfill, just because of the physical space of it.
I am so delighted to have this conversation with you, and I'm really sorry, but I'm the first presenter in the next conversation I have to go to.
Well,
so if you continue talking as a group, would somebody just keep the notes and send them to me? Because I wasn't joking when I said we really want your ideas. And so what I've heard so far is one time only for recycling, or cardboard is not enough. How about having some kind of an app where you could tell us what you have and what needs to be picked up? And that you like starting small. Is that right? Did I miss anything?
All right. Well, thank you for your presentation very much. Good luck on your next presentation.
Thank you. Sure wish I could stay. Bye.
Thank you. It was great.
All right. I see one hand up, Melody.
I just had a comment because I need to leave soon as well, but the Richland landfill, a few years back started a really aggressive program to keep things out of the landfill so that their landfill would last longer. And I think maybe having someone from there come and talk to us might be a good idea.
Yeah, well, I know at Bickleton, they have a very aggressive program for harvesting methane and pumping the acids from the landfill back onto the landfill with using the same piping system.
Yeah.
Acids run downhill, methane run uphill, and they produce a lot of generated power from that free methane that's not going into the atmosphere. And it's been very successful for them. It's extended their landfill capabilities from 2040 probably up until 2080 or 90 based on the reduced amount of landfill that they have by composting it basically in that way. So there's a lot of neat things to be able to do, but it has to be a coordinated effort, and it's on the landfill side of it. But I still think there's some small wins that could be had on the recycling portion.
Yeah, I think this is something we should talk about more.
Yeah. Well, if we get around to a city committee that looks at this, city administrator, I would nominate Melody if she's willing, because she's got a passion for that. Yep. Out of this committee anyway, I would, if she's willing to, but okay. With that, we'll move on to the speed study of Tamarison Road.
Okay, I'll introduce the consultants, DKS Associates. This was a study that was actually brought forth by the county and city of Walla Walla, and we tagged along so that way it could be looked at from a full corridor because Tamarison, Prospect Avenue, and Reeser Road's a weird hodgepodge of speed limits, so figuring out what would be the correct speed limit and to manage this as a full corridor. So with that, I will turn it over.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. I'm Scott Manser with DKS Associates. And as Michael had mentioned, we were hired by the city of Walla Walla and kind of a partnership with Walla Walla County and the city of College Place to evaluate the Tamarison Road, Prospect Road, and Reeser Road corridor to evaluate the existing speeds and make some recommendations for what we would suggest the speeds to be. Let's see. Oops, sorry, it was delayed. I'll go through a little bit of the project background and goal of the project, share the project area, discuss the new requirements and the speed limit tool that's available. There used to be a really rigid process that you had to follow for setting speed zones. And now there's a little bit more flexibility that cities and counties have to apply for speed zones. And that's one of the reasons the city engaged us in this process. And then our suggested and recommended speed limits, and then the next steps for the study. So the background and goal, again, the study roadway is a 4.4 mile corridor of Reeser Road, Prospect Ave, and Tamarison Road. I mentioned the agencies involved, and one of the real reason this kind of rose to the top as a desire is there's been a lot of citizens and agency concerns regarding all the kind of the hodgepodge of existing speeds throughout the corridor. And right now the speeds range from 25 to 35 miles per hour for posted speeds, and there's also some 25 mile per hour speed zones near Prospect Elementary and Walla Walla High School. And then the project goal is, again, to just evaluate the speed limits that currently exist and make some recommendations based on the most recent changes in national research methods and tools, and also the Washington state laws as well. So this is showing the existing jurisdiction. So the piece that we're talking about today is this kind of short segment on Tamarison Road that's within the city of College Place. But as you can see from this segment, there's also 3 segments that are within the city of Walla Walla and some larger segments as well that are within Walla Walla County. So this is showing the existing speed limit. So the portion, a short portion, is 25 miles per hour. And then that changes to 35 miles per hour in this segment, and then it drops down to 30 miles per hour, and then it increases back up to 35. And then you have the 35-mile-per-hour segment next to Prospect Point Elementary and Walla Walla High School. And then you can see the yellow dash, that's where the existing school speed zones exist. And then on Reeser Road to the east is 35 miles per hour. So as we looked, we collected some data at 8 locations, some 24-hour speed and volume count, classification counts, determine the types of trucks, as well as the different speeds of vehicles through this corridor. And one of the counts was within College Place in the vicinity of the Harvest to Marson intersection. Let's see, this presentation was for also Walla Walla County and the city, so I may skip through a few just to save time, but you can see a few of the pictures. There is a school speed zone, as I mentioned earlier, and there's also a speed radar sign near Prospect Point Elementary School that provides the driver what their speed is in relation to the existing posted speed to help keep the speeds down adjacent to the schools. And this is the new NCHRP report that came out that gives states, counties, and cities a little bit more flexibility in the guidance on posted speed limits. And this tool takes more, in the past, counties and cities would just go out and do a speed study. And based on what that 85th percentile speed that resulted from the speed study, that's what you would use to set your posted speeds.
Excuse me.
Yes.
I just wanted to let people know that I do have to leave because I have another appointment, but I will listen to the rest of this on the YouTube video. So it's nothing that you said.
No problem. Thank you for letting me know.
Melody.
Bye.
Yep. All right. So in this tool, it not only takes the 50th and 85th percentile speed information, but it also takes bicycle and pedestrian activity information. It takes the roadway context. Is it urban or rural? Are there sidewalks? Are there bike lanes? It takes crash data into account, as well as some of the roadway and street geometrics. And so this tool, we end up kind of in these different segments, we input the information, and then that gives us suggested speed limits. And that's the tool that we used. And as we looked at, this is some of the segment input and the segment that's within the city of College Place. It's a little bit hard to see, but you can see that was actually one of our higher crash segments. There was 34 crashes in the city of College Place segment. There's about 6,000 vehicles per day. The length of this segment was about 0.8 miles. So this does include a small portion of within the city of College Place and the city of Walla Walla. And the 85th percentile speed, and as I mentioned, the data that we had here was near the Harvest intersection within College Place. And the 85th percentile speed was 38 miles per hour, and the 50th percentile speed was 33 miles per hour. And that segment is the 25 mile per hour posted segment. So one of the things you can see is traffic was traveling quite a bit faster than the posted speed. And I just want to explain to you what 50th and 85th percentile speeds, what that means. An 85th percentile speed is the speed that 85% of the vehicles that we collected and we evaluated in our traffic counts and our data collection, 85% of the vehicles were traveling at 38 miles per hour or slower. So that actually means that the 15% of the vehicles were actually traveling faster than that 38 miles per hour. And then our 50th percentile speed was right around 33 miles per hour, which means about half of the traffic was traveling at 33 miles per hour or slower, and the other half was traveling faster than 33 miles per hour. And then we had some other data points along the segment that you can see where we collected traffic volumes and speeds and crash data. So once we collected that data, we then use this tool to determine what the tool suggested as speed limits once we put in all of the information. And what that tool suggested was to basically have a 35 mile per hour speed, pretty much from SR 125 all the way to 3rd Avenue. And then at 3rd Avenue, when we started getting closer to the schools and had different pedestrian and bicycle data assumptions that would go into the tool, it dropped that down to 30 miles per hour. And then in the segment next to the school, it was closer to 25 miles per hour with the existing speed zone of 20 miles per hour. But what this does, that provide this suggestion kind of shows what the, just provides a little bit more consistency within the project corridor. And then we took the suggested speed limits and then made a recommendation just for consistency. And this is the DKS recommended to keep the 35 mile per hour speed zone all the way up to Cottonwood, and then run with a 30 mile per hour adjacent to the schools, along with the 20 mile per hour school speed zone. So really, when it comes to the city of College Place, what we're recommending is to go from the existing 25 mile per hour speed limit up to 35 miles per hour, which is similar to the speed data that we collected and between the 85th and the 50th percentile. One thing to think about, or one thing to know, as you look at the data, even though there's flexibility and there's additional data, typically you aren't going to see recommendations or suggestions that are going to be faster than that 85th percentile speed or slower than that 30th percentile speed. So we're kind of right. That's kind of where that 35 mile per hour recommendation came from in that tool, as well as what we've recommended. Are there any questions so far?
I have one, Scott.
Yes.
I was just wondering if any sightline distances were considered here, because on the first part of Tamarison, as that area develops there's a Burger King going in there soon and different areas. And you're also coming up to needing to stop, and it's a pretty good sized corner there leading up to the Meadowbrook intersection. 35, you can do it at 35, but it feels really, really fast at that point. And so I was wondering if those kinds of considerations were sight distance and curvature of the road was taken into consideration on the speeds as well.
Yeah, Commissioner Bennett, I actually have 2 more slides, and I think one of my slides will cover what you're talking about, and then maybe I'll open it up for more questions. Does that work?
Okay.
Because I think that will answer maybe some of the other questions that might have at this point. So you make a great point, and this is a perfect example that even though when you go and change your speed limit, it doesn't necessarily mean that there aren't other improvements that are going to be needed with this change. And one of those examples is this curve, right, as you go from SR 125. So this will need to be evaluated, as well as other intersections. So there's still going to need to be an engineering study that takes this recommendations and goes in and takes a look. And so even though if this is 25 miles per hour, this curve may work okay today, but if we increase it to 35, that may mean we need to provide some flashers or some speed warning signs in this area to set that 25 miles per hour speed in this segment. So that's something that, also intersection sight distance. With those higher speed traffic will be traveling faster, and we'll have to make sure at intersections that there isn't vegetation or fences that may, change with the requirement change, if that makes sense. And so our next steps is my last slide. My next steps is for, we're continuing to work with all 3 agencies to approve the recommended posted speed limits with each agencies. We've already presented to Walla Walla County, and they had a few questions and wanted us to then, once we presented to the city of College Place and to the city of Walla Walla, they wanted us to come back to kind of share what we heard and what feedback we received before they made a decision. But kind of after the speed zones are, the recommendations are provided by each of the agencies. Then the agencies need to work to evaluate the existing roadway geometrics, look at the curve signage and the intersection sight distance, as I mentioned, and then the design and implementation of the proposed speed zone. So those new speed zone signs wouldn't go up until whatever modifications would be required to improve those. So with that, that's the end of my presentation. I'd be happy to take any other questions.
Okay, Dan, go ahead.
Yeah, a couple of questions. Could you review the length of time that you spent on data collection? I know that was a question with the Board of Commissioners, and I just don't remember how long you spent collecting data.
Yes. So the 24-hour count, we did one day between Tuesday and Thursday, where we set up tubes at 8 locations and collected data over a 24-hour period.
Okay, and then also, I know George brought up the Burger King at that corner. But looking at that slide that you just had,
Yep, I'll go
I
back to
know
that
that,
for you.
yeah, and this may be actually a question for the city and possibly Public Works. I do know that I believe a private school is south of there, but also another private school in the valley uses Tamarison, Bliss, Peppers Bridge, right, that area as a school bus pickup and drop off zone. Would that take it into consideration for this speed limit? And would that change in the future?
So let me ask you, so when you say would change, meaning would that be appropriate for, say, a school speed zone, or are you just saying would it change the recommendation? If
change the recommendation.
Okay, and can you provide are you saying that that's kind of a location where maybe parents drop off kids at a bus?
It's actually where the bus stops twice a day, weekdays, to pick up and drop off kids.
Okay,
along there.
And do they just so they live in that general area, and so they would walk to this location?
Right.
Yeah. So that really wouldn't, I believe we already, for the data that we had, that would be included in our recommendations for the recommended speed. So I don't believe that would change, any of our assumptions. However, that seems like it would be more applicable to consider a school speed zone, because that's where it's going to be flashing. You want those speeds set when students are going to be crossing or they're going to be in that general vicinity. So that seems like a separate question that would be more, is this appropriate to apply a school speed zone?
Okay, thank you.
Or
yes,
in addition, Scott, like signage saying school bus stop ahead, something of that nature, that could also be considered.
Yeah, exactly. If it's an on-street, I mean, there are some other, as we talked about, the signage, and that would be something. If they're parking, or pulling off in the neighborhood, that would be one thing. But if they are stopping along Tamarson, then that would be some other advanced warning signage that we could provide.
Yeah, some other things that the city would consider as that area develops and you have more people would be maybe some RFL lights for pedestrian crossing areas in there that would help alleviate the varying, the speed limit as well. To make a comment, I like the idea of having consistent speed through there.
Yes.
Just personally, I feel like 35 might be a little fast through this first little section here. But then again, I get on Tamarson farther, and 30 is hard to maintain because it's wide. There's no parking along either side of the street up through there, although it's allowed. There are never any cars parked out there on Tamarson. So it's hard to go 30 through that section. But I do like the idea of a consistent speed limit through the area. So anyway, this is good data as far as it also might show an area where enforcement might be needed. It might not be that just because the percentile of people are traveling that fast doesn't mean they should have been traveling that fast, no matter what the speed limit. So yep. I like the two-pronged approach, the study of what's happening and where it's happening and what that means to the area. And then the second approach is to take your study and see how that applies and fits to those areas with the other geometric concerns and signage and what have you.
Yeah, you make an excellent point. I will say that the only way to really, if you have posted speeds, if there's no enforcement in this area, no regular enforcement, traffic's going to travel what they feel comfortable with. They're not going to just look at the sign and say, oh, I'm going to go this speed. Yeah. They're going to, look at the geometrics and what because that's one of the problems. That's one of the real challenges with what we're doing with traffic design and roadway design is we always design for the car that's going faster. So if you're going to have a 30-mile-per-hour posted speed, we design that for a little bit faster because if a car is traveling faster, we want them still to be safe. But it's just that balance. But yeah. That's a good point.
Historically, I think there's been, heavy enforcement there, but more recently, given COVID and other restrictions and contact and other issues related with that. I think it's probably waned to some degree. Being a reserve officer that has that in the jurisdiction, I can attest to that personally, that there just isn't the same emphasis on that type of patrol like there was a while ago, and maybe we need to pick that up a little bit. But I really appreciate your work on this and your approach and your explanation of it. That helps a lot too. And look forward to having some further input on it as it goes to the kind of the next step.
Okay.
So yeah. Anybody else? All right. With that, appreciate the report, and that's it, Scott. Thank you for that.
Okay.
And Jenna,
Thank you.
appreciate your work on that. And that completes our agenda today. Is there any other comments or questions from the commissioners? All right, seeing none, and we completed our agenda, we will adjourn, and it is 4:20, and our meeting is adjourned.
Thank you. See you all.
Lisa?
I just wanted to note the next meeting is
Oh.
February 10th, 2022, 3:30.
So noted. And re-adjourned. Thank you all.
Thanks.
Thanks.